I'm James White, Director of Film Dying Memories, and you are?
I'm Miss Whiteley. I did a degree in media studies and I'm here today to talk about your film.
Yep, that's fine. So obviously we're just going to go through what kind of things you felt the film worked really well on, what could be improved, and obviously other things like that, and just a few random questions about it. First question I've got is, what do you feel was the greatest aspect my film had going for it?
I was really impressed by the way that you had quite a sophisticated take on adhering to the genre conventions. So it was very clear to me immediately that we were looking at a horror zombie movie. You managed to adhere to these conventions, not just in the typical ways through plot, but I could really see that your inspiration had come from films like 28 Days Later. Your introductory shot with the spinning is really disorienting, and straight away it puts your audience in a feeling of unease and starts building tension. So you've got your audience right where you want them.
Yeah.
I think that the use of the grey lighting meant that your mise en scène, your location, looked really gritty in that kind of 28 Days Later style. That's what it reminded me of. And I would also say that the flickering between the crossfades, like the flickering crossfade technique, I feel was really effective again in adhering to that unsettled feeling and getting that horror genre across.
Yeah. Okay, second question. What do you feel could have been improved on drastically in my film, which would make it even more enhanced and better?
So I thought that the ending sequence, where we see our protagonist with his girlfriend, really added a sense of humanity and gave us an insight into his character that we hadn't had before. However, I felt like that was quite a jarring ending, because he's our focus. We've seen him at the beginning, and then we've used flashback, and then we've come back to him, and then we've used flashback. And I think that we should come back to him one more time, because he's our focus in this situation. What he's been through would bring it back and show that you can bring your narrative full circle, and I think that that would be really effective. Another thing that I think would be worth looking at is your use of font. Take a look at the fonts used in zombie horror films, and think about how that could really be used to set the tone. Because we're having that title put straight up, how can that maintain that sense of tension and that tone that you've set up so successfully?
Yep. Do you feel that the editing in the film was used effectively to enhance tension?
I definitely do. The things that I would pick out would be that flickering crossfade, the use of the grey lighting. All of those things really add to that really creepy atmosphere that you've got going all the way through.
That flickering crossfade was actually accidental, but it just looked that good that it just kind of decided to keep it in.
I enjoyed it and thought it was effective.
Do you feel the use of makeup helped create tension in the film?
I feel like you did manage to successfully use the makeup. Obviously, not being in a professional studio, professional makeup artist, it's difficult to get it looking right. The thing that I really think helped it and stopped it from looking silly or cartoonish was your use of lighting. I think that without the lighting, it might not have looked very realistic, but using that technique allowed it to look sort of more gruesome.
Yeah. Do you feel that the narrative was clear to you, like what the character was going through with like the use of flashbacks? In fact, it was a non-linear storyline.
Absolutely. I think that that became very clear because of your change of lighting. The fact that you changed that made it very clear that I was witnessing something out of sequence. As I said, the only thing that I would contribute to the idea of the non-linear narrative would be just bring it full circle at the end.
Yeah. What kind of films did my film kind of remind you of, like going from any period in time to now?
The one that really it seemed reminiscent of to me was 28 Days Later, and that opening scene where he's in the city and he's completely isolated, having your isolated protagonist in that kind of gritty urban mise-en-scène was what it reminded me of.
Yeah, it was kind of a mix between 28 Days Later and George A. Romero's Day of the Dead, so
There we go
that's
then.
kind of the things I was going for.
Well, you've done that successfully.
Yeah.
One thing that I would suggest is when he's engaged in the fight with the zombies, and he brings up his thing and he hits it down, and we hear it smash off stone.
Yeah.
I would say that either you want to find a gruesome sound effect.
Yeah.
The issue with that is that it may sound quite cartoony. So you want to play around with it, see if you can find one that sounds good enough.
Yeah.
And if not, another suggestion that I would have is to cut the audio on that and instead have a voiceover of that repetition that you had earlier of the radio. That radio repetition, the voiceover, could almost be like he's remembering the advice that he's heard and he's going to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah? That might be worth trying out.
Well, I did record a sound effect where it was basically the axe hitting a cabbage, and it just makes it sound like the skull is cracking, so...
If you can do that successfully, it doesn't sound too cartoony, might be worth using.
If it does sound a bit cartoony at first, I'll just mess around with the audio a little bit and put some effects on that.
I think that the voiceover technique might be worth experimenting with and see if it looks like he's recalling the advice he was given. That might be quite an effective technique.
Yeah. Well, it's all about the trial and error, really, isn't it? What do you feel were the best camera angles which you used in the film? Like any which really stood out to you?
For me, it's that close-up on his face. I think that we really get an insight into the struggle that he's going through. We can really see his facial expression. I think maybe that's another reason why I think it would be good to come back to that. That's the image that really stands out in my mind.
Yeah. Do you feel you knew what genre of film it was by the first 30 seconds or so?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Could you tell me why you felt you knew what?
Yeah, I think I've already said it a couple of times, but the lighting, the choice of mise-en-scène, I think that those things, and maybe your choice of music as well, was quite tense.
Yeah.
The original shot, the crossfade, all of those things that happen in the first 30 seconds, that's what made me think it.
Yeah. Right, well, that's the end of the questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.